thanks very much for coming along to this, our virtual staff room Google updates. This is the end user updates rather than the admin updates. Those are tomorrow, and you're more than welcome to come along to those as well. If questions and things appear in the chat, by all means do add them into the chat. I'll just double check that I have turned it on now. Oh yeah, there's stuff coming in, of course I have. Okay, and you've also got the hand raising in the bottom. If you post a question, one of my other C-Learning colleagues will make a judgment call about whether it's right to answer the question at that moment, and they'll interrupt me, or whether they'll answer the questions at the end. But do please post any questions that you've got, or thoughts and comments, of course. These are the updates from last month, so we can go through them each in turn. This one actually doesn't probably apply to us because it's talking about how you can export your grades from Google Classroom to a student information system, what we call a management information system. But I put it in not necessarily because I think it applies to, I think Follett Aspen, which is the one that's added to the list that they can export to, is primarily American. I don't think any of us use that here in the UK. No, I've never heard of anyone, but it just gives you a sight of what it will look like. That in the cog you will have the option to export all your mark book directly into your grade systems, whatever your management information systems is, and that is coming. And the number of management information systems that we can actually export to will increase over time, and will start eventually to include some UK ones like Sims and Schoology and all the others that are on the list. Okay, we had a question about this last update, which was in January, about the live captions. Those are now generally available, and so that when you turn on the captions, you've got the option to add a language into which the text will translate into, and you've got 4 options. You've got more options about the source language. So if I could go into my settings and say the language of this meet is English, but then you could then go to closed captions if you've got a teaching and learning license or an Education Plus license, and say I want to translate it into French, German, Portuguese or Spanish. So you have to have the license attached to the account that's making the choice, otherwise those options won't appear, but they are there for teaching and learning upgrades and for Education Plus. And actually we tried it last week, and I'm pleased with how accurate they were. I'm assuming they are accurate because I don't speak any of those languages desperately well. A spattering of French, but there we go. But I think that will only continue to grow. The list of languages will extend, and so on and so forth. But like I say, teaching and learning or Education Plus only. Companion mode is a new thing as well, and because we kind of seem to be in and out in waves of remote and face-to-face teaching and things, and sometimes having to do a hybrid combination of the two, you can actually join a meet in companion mode. And what that allows you to do, it allows you to use that second companion mode to present. So I could stay in the meet and see all the students' faces and have my slide deck presentation running in companion mode. One of the nice things about it is if you go to one of these Google shortcut addresses, g.co/companion, you can see on the image on the right there that it actually gives you all your upcoming calendar items. So you can say, you go to that web address, click on the event that you want to join, and it automatically joins you in companion mode, and it turns off all the kind of audio settings so that you don't get feedback. And that's, when you're running multiple devices into the same meet, that's really, really quite important to be able to do that, which is very good. This notification is more about it being linked to Nest Hub Macs. If you've got those, they tend to be domestic devices rather than school devices. But some of you might have the Google Meet hardware, and you can also do it inside you can use companion mode with those as well. But you can just use it on a second device. So I think the potential for it is actually quite high, and one that's worth considering, particularly with the really easy to get to shortcuts that Google have supplied, g.co/companion, or if you want to go straight into present mode, g.co/present, and it joins you already presenting the tab that you choose to present, which is good. Okay, this is now a Google Drive warning that you will start to get if Google's scanning processes raises a document that they think is suspicious in some way, shape or form, they'll get the big yellow banner across the top to tell you that they think it's suspicious and that you should act accordingly. So just to be aware that that's going to start to appear. I haven't ever seen it yet appear on any of the documents that I've dealt with, and we deal with very large numbers, of course, but just to be aware that that's what it tells you across the top, and I think you should just hopefully come out of there until you're certain that it's not. You don't want to start messing with stuff that's a bit suspicious. So just to tell you that the warning's going to start to appear. Okay, I tested this morning and it's still not here on our domain, but it should be here shortly. And you're just getting better formatting options in text inside Google Chat. So you write your message, highlight the word you want to change or adapt or make bold or whatever, and the letter A will be there in the chat. Currently we've only got the smiley face going right. We don't have the letter A on our domain yet. It might be on your domain already, if you wanted to check it, but that seems to me really quite nice that you can start to add a bit more highlighting of all sorts of different kinds to the text that you put in the chat. And I think that's all part of a wider kind of chat and email integration, which we'll come to a little later in these notices. It's all about making all of it kind of integrate better, I think. So page break is coming to mobile, and this is just a screenshot of the bottom of the editing tools when you're on the mobile. I suspect if you haven't got it yet, you might just need to update and that will appear. But you can just highlight the bit. In this example, it's tips and tricks, and then you add a page break before. The page break would appear just before the highlighted bit of text. So that's just adding a bit more functionality. And it's always the case, isn't it? The functionality in the mobile app is pretty good, but it does always it's always a bit behind the web-based app, isn't it? I suppose it's as you'd expect, because it's kind of a cut down version of the tool. But that's coming and should be here shortly. This is quite nice. New option to add watermarks into Google Docs. That's already here on our domain, which is quite nice. I've got a document open I can show you it on, and I can demonstrate some of these at the end if needs be. Excuse me. You can actually add an image as a watermark if you like. So if you've wanted to put the school badge in the background, you could, but you can also add text like draft or internal use only or whatever, and only the owner can then remove the watermark. So whoever created the document is the only person who can remove it. So if it's a significant document that happened to leak and you didn't realize and people were claiming it, you could actually say, well, actually no, if you look, it does still say draft. So it's quite handy that it's a single person control of that, which is quite good. And it just appears, as you can see, as a watermark on all of your docs. And I say that's already here on our domain, so I think it might already be generally available. Originality reports have been with us for quite a long while, but they've only been in Google Docs, of course, and they're now going to be available in Google Slides. I wanted to show a little picture of it in the classroom, marking a slide deck, but the GIF wasn't behaving, and it wouldn't let me import it properly, so that's why we're looking at a blank slide there. But that's good that it's extending across other sources. It'd be interesting to see if they ever get it to extend across Google Sheets. So if someone's borrowed a whole load of statistical data that they're claiming as their own, whether it would actually co-opt that, but we'll have to wait and see. But it's now in Google Slides, so that's good that you can do it. Clearly, originality reports are limited by your license. If it's a fundamentals license, each classroom gets 5 originality report a year, so you can attach it to 5 assignments a year. If you're on a paid-for license, then you get unlimited. But a great tool. The reason I like originality reports is, unlike Turnitin, which generally isn't used by the students, it's only tends to be used by the tutors and lecturers and things. Originality reports can be run by the student to check how much they've changed a source into their own words. They get a percentage kind of check. Say if it's a 20% match against the original, then they've probably changed it enough. But if it's only like an 80% match, it means they've only just changed a couple of verbs and the odd adjective, and that's not really what it's about, is it? So I like originality reports. I think they're a great resource. And this is new. You might already have seen this. This has been here a little while. This came in mid-January, I think, that if someone now chooses to delete a response, then you can now see that that response has been deleted. If someone responds to a text message and then they get responses to that response, if the original author deletes their message, all the kind of sub responses, if you like, also get deleted. So the thread from the moment of deletion gets deleted. So just be aware of that. But useful thing if if you got misspellings or you've typed without your glasses on, like I sometimes do, and you need to go and delete things because these often just don't make sense. So that's quite nice. This is really quite nice. I like this a lot. I was playing with this morning. If you're in Google Drive and you've been rooting around and searching for things and finding all sorts of stuff when you're in the middle of the note, you don't know where you need to be. If you click in the URL bar and press the tab key, then this little menu that says skip to main content, keyboard shortcuts and accessibility feedback appears across the top, and then you can tab amongst them, and when you get to the one you want, you just press enter. So in this example, busy routing through your Google Drive, go to the URL bar, press tab, this menu appears, and you can either click on it or whichever one's highlighted, just press enter and it goes to that bit. So it take you back to your main Google Drive home, if you like. So nice little bit of functionality if you're there working with your mouse and keyboard in combination. And I think this is the first that they've added. It might be they start to add more. I don't know. It doesn't tell us that. But main content, keyboard shortcuts, and accessibility. If you can't see that, it is a little bit blurred. So that's the updates there. This I'll talk about this tomorrow in the admin Techie Tuesday updates as well. I think this has got huge legs, huge potential. This, which is basically adding labels to documents. You can add up to 5 labels. The super admin person can categorize those labels so they can be ready made and ready labeled, and then the end user just says, yeah, it's internal use only, it's top secret, it's financial information, or whatever the 5 labels are. And you can force users to apply the labels by sub-organization. You can set warnings based on the labels. And you can also, so in your data loss protection rules, once the labels are kind of applied and in place, you can say there's a data loss protection rule that says if someone tries to share this, warn them. Or if someone tries to share this, stop them downloading this document. So you can change the sharing settings on a document that's got a label. If it says internal use only, for example, your admin person could write a label that says, yeah, if it says internal use only, turn off the option to download and to print. So that kind of really, that automatic process of protecting your data is really useful. It's a kind of admin function, but actually I put it here because if your admin person chooses to go down this route, then you will start to see situations where you'll be asked to apply a label to a document to categorize it according to the rules that your admin person has set. So just for you to be aware that this might start to happen. I think it allows for you to keep your data much more secure. So it's definitely one that you should look at very seriously. I think it's one of those things that your end users might not like it at first, but like all of these things, if you just hold your nerve for 2 weeks, the complaints would normally die down, and they'll just accept they haven't got any choice, and they'll just get on with it. So I just think it's got huge legs in terms of much greater security, and it's a really good additional tool that's being added. I checked again this morning. This hasn't arrived for us yet because it only just started with the 7th, aren't we? Not the 8th, so it'll be tomorrow. Yeah, with the 7th, so that's why. So it starts to roll out tomorrow, and you should start to see an option to opt in to a new view, and you can see the image on the right, a new view of your Gmail, which will have an extra kind of column on the far left that gives you Gmail, chat, spaces, and meet, so you can flip between them very, very quickly at one. If you do opt to have this added in, I suspect you'll probably need to refresh your browser. There might even be an update, but once it's in, you've always got the option to go back to the old version for the moment. In April, it'll be available for everyone. Yeah, for the moment you have to opt in. From April, everyone will suddenly start to see it, but they'll have an option to revert back to the old view should they choose to. and from the end of this second quarter, so May, June time, sometime, we don't know exactly when, it will become the standard view, and there'll be no option to revert back. I did read through the documentation. I'm not absolutely sure about it, but I think the bubbles at the bottom show you who are active and online. And they did make kind of reference to it, but I didn't quite understand what they were saying. Maybe I should have reread it twice. But again, I think this is all part of that move towards tighter and tighter integration between all the different apps, so that you have to travel less far to do the tasks that you need to do. So you don't now need to go to a completely separate chat window to do all your chat things. You can just click the chat icon here, or to the spaces and so on and so forth. And if I go back to the chat one, which was here, this plus sign on the left of the text bar is also part of that same process. That if you are in the chat, that plus sign gives you the option to add a calendar item, a document, a slide deck, a sheets, and so on and so forth. So it's again, you don't have to go to your drive to do these. You don't have to go anywhere else. You can just do it. If you need to share a document with that chat group or that space, then you can do it from in there. This interface change for your Google Mail is part of that same kind of integration and workflow efficiency process, I suppose, is what it's all about. Okay, and that will be all fully uploaded for everyone to use by the end of June. And those are the updates for January 2022. I have to think about the year then for a moment. The next updates for you, it's normally the first Monday of the month, but of course the Monday, the March starts on a Tuesday, so we're going to the following week. So normally it's user updates and then admin updates the following day, but they're going to swap round. It'll be the 1st of March will be the Techie Tuesday updates, and the following Monday will be this next updates for the user interface. So that's a quick fly through all the updates that you are to expect, and many of these, because they were early January, will already be in place. Any thoughts or comments or questions about any of those? Anything in the chat?
No, not this moment, Paul, but of all those updates, which do you think are going to be most significant over the coming days and weeks for the actual teachers and or students, Paul?
I was to pick, can I pick more than one? I think originality report into Google Slides is good, because it alerts the teacher and the student. If they've taken a quote from a famous person, if they're doing a slide deck presentation, and it's quite right they would do that, but they haven't referenced where that quote came from, for example, then it would just alert that teacher and that student to that. So that's good, because it builds good practice into their kind of educational process. That one would be quite important. I think the labels in terms of security and thinking about how significant it is to protect this document is actually quite an important one when that starts to appear for those organizations that choose to adopt that, because that's an option to turn that on. And then the third one is the integration of interfaces. It seems every step that they make, it's about increasing that workflow, making you more efficient. So you haven't got to go somewhere to do something. It's there in that, whether you're in Mail or you're in Drive or you're in Chat, you can go to all these other places without having to go to a separate tab or a separate app to complete those particular tasks. So those integrations, I think. So those are the three that I think we're seeing a lot of. The integration, originality reports is a good one, and the Mail interface.
Okay, no, that's great.
Security labels.
Yeah, that's great, Paul. And for because this is aimed at the recording, obviously, in the slide decks which you share with everybody who comes on the call. This is aimed at the end users as opposed to the IT and network and admin sort of people. So I guess just a question from all the customers on the call. Do you actually sort of share with your end users the slides that Paul shares and or the recordings And have you had any feedback from your end users about these resources? And Paul, my final thing is, are all these things still recorded on a YouTube channel? So if somebody wants to go back to December and November and whatever else, can they go back and see other recordings?
Yes, they're on the YouTube channel, and yes, that people can go and look at previous recordings. Absolutely. My colleague Chris very kindly sends out the slide deck, and he extracts out it month by month. I'm going to scroll through endless number of slides because all the updates from the year are in a single slide deck from me. So if you do want to catch up via the slide deck, just let me or Chris know, and I will send you the complete slide deck for you to view. And they are all on our YouTube channel as well. So yes, everyone will get a copy. I'm just going to get to my YouTube channel so I can encourage people to go there and subscribe.
Yeah, no, that's good. So perhaps Dave, Andy, not wishing to put you on the spot, but I will do. Is this useful in terms of your colleagues, your other teachers? Do you share it with them?
Oh, Dave's added in, and I've just said it. Yeah, I share the slides out, and then also try and time those when we have a staff meeting, and just run through those as well. So present that slide deck and run through similarly to the way that Paul does it. Yeah, so it's good.
No, that's great. And Dave, obviously they're there. Thanks that you share them. Do they come back and say, "Oh, that's really interesting"? I didn't understand that, or
yeah, there's a few that I think they're just not aware of. Otherwise, unless you subscribe to the updates from Google themselves, I've had quite a few people come back and say, "Oh, I didn't realize it could do that. That's brilliant." I think the way that we share it is quite useful in that the headlines almost are on the slides, and then if you want to know more, you get to jump on YouTube and hear Paul's dulcet tones talking about exactly what it is and how it can be useful to you in an education perspective, because I think that's something that this gives over and above the output from Google.
Yeah, no, that's fine. And I'm always conscious, Chris, one of our colleagues, sort of uses a wonderful visual indicator, a star, to highlight things. And Paul, I wonder whether as you did today verbally, where you said of all the things that have been sort of brought to everybody's attention today, here as a teacher, these would be the three that I think as a teacher I would be most interested in. I just wonder whether that might just help draw people's attention to, oh, I'd really like to look at all these things, but if I'm only going to look at a couple, maybe I just look at these three that have been starred or whatever else. What do you think?
Yeah, that might be quite useful kind of summary, if you like. Yeah, our own version of EDU in 90. I was also conscious that Chris is on the call, actually, and Chris has got feedback about how useful people find these slide decks from some of the customers that you send them out to. Do you want to share what people are saying, Chris?
Yeah, I can jump in there. Yeah, we always get a lot of tremendous feedback. I know Andy is one of the people who does that. Lorraine McCool would be another one who always comes back and says they're incredibly useful. We also send them out to a few people who have interest in Google Workspace, one of the paid editions, but might not necessarily at this point be able to move forward with it. So they've actually used the decks as well as a point to go to senior leadership teams to push that forward. And I think Brendan, who's on the call, Leeds City College, I think Natasha is the initial contact for the slide decks, and I know Natasha shared them over with Brendan, and today he's very kindly joined us on the call, which is great to see. So yeah, always a lot of positivity from the people that send them out, and I'm not sure anybody else does this, Paul, but we certainly go the extra mile with this, and it's greatly appreciated by everyone who we send them out to. So we will continue to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. Good. Thanks very much for Chris. The other thing that's worth saying whilst you are on the call is that generally speaking, I don't know if it's still true because I'm forever telling people to do this, but Google in the past have said to me that education generally are not desperately good at giving feedback about what they want in terms of functionality. They're quite good to say, if something's broken, of course you'll speak to Google or you'll speak to us or whatever, but actually very often, if things are going fine, they won't think, oh, actually, I could really do if it could do this. And every single Google app will have either a little circle with a question mark in it or a help menu, and inside the help menu will either be a report an issue or a feature request button where you can go in there and you can say, I just need this tool to be able to do A, B, and C. Now, if you're the only person asking for Google for it to do that particular function, then it almost certainly won't happen, I'm afraid. But if you are one of many, then they will, all the comments get read and they get categorized and triaged, I suppose. And those that feature most heavily are the ones that go onto the development list. And once they have developed it and it's in beta being tested, you'll get an email saying, that feature you said you wanted to have a go at, would you like to join the beta trial? So you get the chance to join the trial as and when it's ready, even before everybody else does. So they do email you back to let you know they've added it in, which is quite nice. And I would encourage you to encourage all your staff to do the same. Yeah, because unless you tell them, then of course it won't happen. And in education, it can happen on relatively little responses. And the same person, when I was talking to him, he said they made a change in Google Classroom with less than 200 requests. Because I think they looked at it and thought, yeah, that's quite right. That should have been in there in the first place. So they make a judgment call based on the number of people that ask and the quality of the questions that are being asked. So do please feedback, little question mark in a circle or the help menu, and it'll be report an issue or feature request. So do please keep that in mind and encourage your staff to do it. And don't worry that it's 50 staff from a single school. It won't matter. If you all want that functionality, it'll be classed as 50 separate requests. So do please encourage them to feedback. Any other thoughts and questions? Any things that people are particularly keen to see on their domain, which aren't there yet?
Just looking in the chat there, Paul, I can see Marcus has commented on the translations.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah, I see it. Yeah. Oh, that's good to know, because we were asked about it in December, no, in January, and we tried it. It didn't quite work, Chris. Do you remember? So that's good, Marcus.
Yeah,
was it accurate?
Yeah, there was a few mistakes, but in general, it was accurate. It sort of corrected itself when it was going faster. There was a pause for it to correct itself. I was looking at Spanish, which was native Spanish, Spain. The Portuguese was Brazilian Portuguese.
All right.
And yeah, that's really impressive.
Yeah,
it'd be useful for us because when they have the parent-teacher meetings, there can be a bit of a language barrier, and you've got that covers most of the languages with it.
Yeah,
we have. Okay.
Yeah, for those of you who are a little late, Marcus is actually supports schools in Portugal. So so yeah, very useful for that particular situation. And of course, the list of languages will increase. It's currently 4, but it will French, German, Spanish, and Portuguese. But that list will increase. So start to cover lots and lots of other languages as well. So so that's good.
Paul, one of the things that came out today for those schools more here in the UK were all the arrangements around examinations and for 2022. Apologies, Jonas and Marcus, it may or may not have some things. I'm just curious to the reaction of people from the UK. Do they have all the systems and the resources in place to deal with this year's examination sort of timetables and delivery and whatever else, or are there sort of challenges that we might be able to help them with?
Anyone? Andy, yes, go for it.
I think we could look at maybe. I'm trying to get our head of curriculum to have a look at Chromex. It's now been renamed to something I keep forgetting. Why didn't you just leave it as Chromex? It was so easy. To have a look at those and how we can use Chromebooks, particularly for people who got either a spell check or without spell check. How we can do that. I know you've got a contact there. It's just about kickstarting our academic head because he's still stuck in, or we need a laptop.
Yeah, I was going to just jump in there, Andy, just to say that, yeah, if you've got anybody that we need to demonstrate this to,
yeah,
we'd be happy to. We'd be happy to do so. I can get you set up with a trial, free trial.
Yeah.
It's only for 10 users, but it will give you an indication the power of the tool. It's a fantastic online assessment and exam tool. Digital exam tool. It's superb. So I highly recommend dropping me a line after the call. We can set you up with a quick demo and trial on that, Andy.
Yeah, that'll be great because at the moment we haven't really. We're just trying to ascertain the numbers that we need of devices, and because I think the mindset is because Chromebooks are inherently online, people assume you can't use them. But there are ways and means to get those set up, either with with the device itself or with your web filtering to block or filter things. So yeah, I'd be keen to do that, Chris. Thanks for the offer.
Yeah, absolutely. With Trelson, it's a completely sort of lockdown device. You just get the exam. You get to whitelist any websites that you want the students to be able to visit, or individual pages on websites, or you can restrict them completely. But there's a lot of additional tools in there as well. Like you say, there's speech to text, text to speech. You can grant additional time for certain students as required. So yeah, lots of options in there. We'd love to explore that with you and give you the full run through on the demo and trial.
Yeah, because we were just thinking of deploying it. We've got available ones that we can deploy for that during the exam period. Or do students tend to use their own if it's just internal exams and you just lock them down?
It depends. It kind of depends on what your setup is, I think, Andy, really. But either way, with Trelson, you've got it covered. It's absolutely superb. So I'll ping you a line after the meeting and we'll get something set up there. No problem.
Great. Thank you very much.
Superb. Thank you. No problem.
And I think you've just said it, but the big strength of Trelson for me is the customization for students with additional needs in that exam situation. That makes a huge difference, doesn't it? The management of it is so much easier, I think. Like Chris says, additional time, spell checkers, text to speech, speech to text, those kind of tools that mean that student can access that exam in an as equitable a fashion as possible. I think is a big win. So that's a great tool. Have you come online, Steve? Can you put your camera on? You wanted to say something?
No, just interested in regards to the growth of Trelson. Chromex, we won't go into the reasons why it's changed names, Andy, but it wasn't always the choice. But Trelson is the name of the proprietary software, and then assessment is actually attached to this piece of software. So Trelson is the family name of all of the software, and assessment is linked to this tool. The growth in the UK market is absolutely outstanding, but also there's some great work around unconscious bias within the tool. So actually you can anonymize those exams, remove it so that actually when the marking and everything comes in either low stakes or high stakes, formative and summative, you can evidence that actually you've taken that mode. So there is no decision making led by bias by a teacher. I've been a teacher. And we've all worked in education. Sometimes it just happens, and like I say, it's unconscious. So that's a great element of the tool that I think is understated as well. But if you do decide to take it, you're in great company, because like I say, there's many organisations using it now across the UK, and many more in pilot and testing phase. So yeah, work with Chris, and Chris will get you started on a pilot and a test. It's great to see it in kiosk. Originally it was just an extension, but it's now into the kiosk mode within a Chromebook and the browser. So it's the development of the product is really accelerating, and there's now a roadmap to evidence what has been happening over the last 6 months, and also what's coming over the next 6 months as well.
Great stuff. Thanks, Steve.
Yeah. All right.
Good. Thanks for that. Is this a question, Ian? I'm losing. You've got "or" as if you've written something else, and I'm struggling to find the other "or" that you wrote.
Sorry, say that again, Paul.
So as it was a question to Ian, I've got an Ian.
No, all I was saying, Paul, was we could just widen out the conversation to everybody on the call to basically say, are there any sort of issues or questions or challenges that they've got with the wider Google ecosystem, whether it's training, whether it's Chromebooks, etc., security, health checks, all the sort of things that when we have separate calls, people ask us questions about. I would just we've got another 15 minutes. Useful opportunity for people to just ask questions, because we have a great group of professionals on the call.
Yeah, oh, great. Thanks for that, Ian. So there we go. The invite's there. Any questions, any Google questions, not just necessarily about the updates, but anything? Yes, Andy, do you want to ask your question?
I think the only thing we've still got a few Microsoft diehards who teachers, and it's really through ignorance, really, and they're still downloading a lot of material that's in PowerPoint, and their skill and knowledge base isn't quite there to very quickly amend those in Drive, leaving them as a PPTX, but to maybe change some transition that they like, that feature doesn't work. So they're being a bit of a stick in the mud and saying, well, we can't use it. Even though the delivery of that is into Google Classroom, so it has to work, and has to work seamlessly for the students. It's just that immediate panic of I can't do it, and I sort of freeze and stop. So we're looking at really how to either have some, train them to overcome that, because you need to be able to do good presentations. In my book, you need to be able to understand how that presentation works and what the transition does and how you can quickly modify it. Or as a plan B, having one or two either the teaching assistants trained up who can just quickly change it for them, because they're nearly sticking out their necks out saying, no, we still need a Microsoft PC so we can do all this. And I ain't going to go down that route, I'm afraid.
Well, it's good to hear that you're not. It is hard, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's a conversation we've had a few times. There's a phrase I use, which is selective Luddite. That we select the technologies we adopt and fight like fury to avoid adopting the ones that we don't want to adopt for whatever reason. And it's often about it's an emotional response, isn't it, as much as anything else? Fear of change or whatever happens to be.
Yeah.
So you've got to be considerate of that in the process, but equally you've also got to, the costs of running both systems in terms of your time and money is also too great to consider. You need an efficient system, so you need to go down a single route, really. And we know Chromebooks offer a much better value for money. So it's about conversations, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's a conversation with that person. Fine. So what is? Let's look at in detail at the actual pinch point. How do we get to that point where it is possible? And we've had some of these conversations, haven't we, where we've seen some of the exemplar materials, which are, a number of them will be fine with just a few adjustments, but there were one or two that didn't quite behave quite right, and you've got to say, well, so what's the whole picture as a percentage? How much of it is fine, and is it really? Do we just need to accept that that's it? And then those last few is just about those are going to have to be a rebuild, but I suspect it'll be quite a small number. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's back to that. It's the change curve thing. It's about the unknown. It's about the confidence, the fear of change, and that emotional response. And for many of them, they're looking to download things maybe the night before to use the following day, and it's just that deflation that they get, or lack of motivation when something doesn't work that works, for them when they were looking at it in a PowerPoint viewer, if you like.
Yeah.
And it's that fear of using it because they've had an experience in the past that has been negative. So it's a whole combination of things, but I agree with you. It's about looking at the emotion of that, and at the end of the day, it's got to be brokered. You have to have that conversation and the understanding, but also to be able to provide something as a, you know, even if it is a plan B and a quick fix as a way out that helps them overcome that, isn't just a hard fail.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah,
But
I think interestingly, many of those features probably wouldn't work in Office 365. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know. So, but yeah, it's a bit of a, it keeps rearing its head.
Yeah, I mean, the other question that we didn't ask when we were having this conversation was, I wonder whether the company that supplies the PowerPoints has got any plans to develop themselves into a Google.
Yeah, I know one particular one. I contacted White Rose Maths, and they're like, Google what? They've got no idea. They've got no plans afoot to move out of anything in just PowerPoint. That's just solely what they do, and their resources are cheap. I mean, you look at people traditionally who use stuff like that, who were BoardWorks. BoardWorks have moved on. They've rewritten all those into HTML5, you know, sort of web apps and things that work seamlessly. So people like that are just going to drop out. You know, they're going to be the people like the blockbusters, aren't they?
Yeah,
they're just going to fall by the wayside because it's not commensurate with anything that people want to move forward with, really.
No.
Yeah, I'm familiar with White Rose Maths and everything else, Dave. I think you're going to come in. My question would be: is there a common pattern of things that people are coming across 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever staff there is that they're seeing? Is it something where it's something that actually doesn't have an impact on teaching and learning? So could it be a transition where it's like, oh, we used to like it flying in on checkboxes. It's like, well, actually, what is the impact on teaching and learning of that? And is that just actually preference, and actually is it needed? I remember when PowerPoint was a shift, it's like, look, I can make noises and look all the different things. I can make it checkbox in and I can make it fly in and bounce from the right. But actually, in terms of a pedagogical approach and impact on teaching and learning, is that just a barrier that's been placed up and it has no impact? Or actually, is it something that we're seeing from the shift of PowerPoint to slides that's massively missing and doesn't and is it you can't do?
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely it's that initial, you know, as Paul said, that emotional reaction, and yet when you actually break it down, a lot of it's about exactly as you say, Steve. It doesn't add any value to the teaching and learning when you break it down, or you can simply, you know, copy the other slide and iterate it and have no transition, and you still get over your point. But we had a look at one last week on rotational symmetry, and it was exactly that. This thing came in, spun round, and then moved 90 degrees, and it's just like, well, take all that crap out and just have it moving 90 degrees.
Yeah, and culture and change is an, you know, it's not a finite game. You know, it isn't, and it's one of the hardest things to change because of the focus, and it's really difficult, I suppose, when you're dealing with individuals. I suppose a tactic that I know I've seen work, and Dave will probably come in terms of his coaching and stuff that he does in regards to, you never want somebody that is kind of really negative in a group of those in a collection. So if there's 10 of them coming together, it literally becomes a B&W club and if they're using transaction analysis, a bit of a bitching morning and whinging club. You want to break those down in terms of one-to-one conversations and try and resolve that problem. But then also thinking about the whole focus of your organisation. You guys do amazing work to focus on the learners, and actually the barriers that they're facing is them, but actually you need to overcome it from the benefit and the impact on teaching and learning and the learning focus. And if that is a conversation that always shifts, then it's not always an easy one, but you can at least say, this is our why, this is why we're moving to this, because this is our why, and it's the impact on teaching and learning. And students, you might have to go through some potential pain, but the impact on students will be great as a whole. Then that's a shift. And I'll stop talking there, Dave, and I know a couple of people had their hands up, but that might be a slant to say.
Yeah, thanks for that. There's useful strategies there.
I think it's absolutely that, isn't it? The start with the why, but also make sure that there's training time built in, because everybody is time poor in education, and if they don't have the time to work out how to use something and they're not supported in that from the beginning, it's too easy for them to say, oh no, it just doesn't happen in Google the same way as it does in the Microsoft environment. For me, there's very little that you can't do with an add-on or an extension that you can already do in the Microsoft side of things. The biggest one that I had outlined to me was when people like to have timers embedded into their PowerPoint presentations, and there wasn't that functionality. But I know that Clay Smith coded a timer add-on for Google Slides as well. And quite often, if it doesn't exist already, you've got AppScript that you can go back to. If you've got anybody in your organization that's got some technical knowledge, they can soon code something as an add-on or an extension through AppScript. So other than that, there's very little that pedagogically I would say can't be achieved. I think it's just that it's the convenience sometimes of converting from PowerPoint to slides or from Word to Docs, using that convert button. If it doesn't come through substantially the same, if it's not 99% identical, then people won't actually look at the depth and say what actually needs to change here to make it usable. They just don't have the time to say, actually, I need to go into each of these files that I've previously had and tweak them to make them Google Slides based, if they can just use PowerPoint. So it's, I do sympathize, and I think that sometimes, yeah, we have to. I mean, I've made the decision not to remove access to the Microsoft programs. You know, my fallback is always, look, if it just doesn't work for you in Slides, sticking in PowerPoint, that's still an option for you. But be aware as to how long that takes to load and to run the files that you've got compared to Google Slides. So, yeah, I have sympathy, but if it's me and if I wanted to prove a point, I could probably make it work in the Google ecosystem.
Yeah, no, I think they're all valid points. I think it's great to say that we need to build that training in so that and give people that time so that they can see that it's not just a burden on their time that they're already squeezed on, you know, to do that as well as all the other stuff. So I think that's a really, really good point. I think what I tended to do is say to people, leave those in a native format. So if it's as a docx or a pptx, leave it as that, because invariably some of the disruption to the transitions come when you try and convert those to a doc or a slide. So leaving them in a native one, often it is a better way, and editing them in there as well. You know, just the simple thing on PowerPoint is just to make a copy of the previous slide and don't bother with the transitions. Just you know, transition from one slide to the next, so you can get that teaching and learning point over. Don't bother with any fancy stuff.
Excellent. Yeah, Brendan, I noticed you put your hand up earlier. Has the moment gone, or do you still something you wanted to say?
I won't say the moment's gone particularly. It was just something we're talking around the idea of some of the issues that people adopting Google from the Microsoft suite, and I think some of it was mentioned by Dave when he was saying that if the document doesn't look 99% correct, then there's a lack of buy-in there. Something that I think is also really important to go back to, and I think, Steve, you might have mentioned this a little bit by saying when you end up with a group of people that are being negative about something, but I think you should always come back to what the learner experience is. And ultimately, if it means that you have an environment that does have some Microsoft things in there, but the Microsoft things are done really, really well and they're working, but and the learner has the right experience on the end of it, then I guess to some degree that's fine. But ultimately, the integration that Google are obviously at the moment, they're really, really trying to push. You see all the changes that are happening, and you can see what's coming on the horizon in terms of exporting things from your Google Classroom into things like Sims. You can see that there's things in the pipeline, the additional languages for the translation. Google are really trying to be quite progressive about the way that they're developing the kit. So going back to that learner experience, there's a conversation to be had with those people that are saying, you know, I really don't want to use Google because I think Google Slides, when I import a slide, all the fonts the wrong size, or this image didn't come out the right way, or it all looks pixelated. All of these things that you hear people saying, ultimately, if that lesson is going to suffer because they've converted that slide and they haven't got the time to adapt the Google Slides version of it and change that deck so that it looks right, then don't use that in the lesson, because ultimately it comes down to the learner's experience. But looking at it from a bigger picture point of view, adopting Google and starting to develop new resources, or using some of your PPA time or some of your downtime to update resources that you've got so that they are right, in the long run, it'll pay off. And I think that's the thing that seems to be a little bit of a sticking point. Anyone I've kind of spoken to that are a bit of a kind of a naysayer for Google or adopting the Google apps, it seems to always come back to, when I have the conversation, what's the learner experience, and are you making sure that you're getting giving the best experience for the learner? Because ultimately, I think that's what it comes back to.
Excellent. Thanks very much for that, Brendan. Yeah, I think that's exactly right, isn't it? Big focus. I mean, we've each said it in our own way, haven't we? And I'll repeat it just to make sure everyone's got it. That focus has got to be about the learning first, hasn't it? That's why we want to put the students in a place where their learning is optimized. So whatever the price is to pay for that, then that's what it, and we shouldn't be that precious about what tool necessarily we use, but equally we've got to be honest and critical about the tools that we use, because actually if it's not broke, then don't fix it isn't not necessarily the best way to review the appropriateness of a tool. And it might well be that there are equally good tools that give you other benefits. I mean, I do think that one of the things that we didn't mention when we first started the conversation was the annotation onto slides, which isn't an option in Google Slides at the moment, and which of course is in PowerPoint, was one of the things that was mentioned in Andy's example, which is a shame. But that's where that feature request button comes in. Did I mention the feature request button? That if people can get back to that, yeah, question mark in the circle or the help thing, yeah, and pester Google to death about those things, and they will appear on the developer's desk pretty soon, and then we'll hopefully be able to make a difference and get the tools that we want, the functions that we want within the tools that we've already got. Excellent. That was a fantastic conversation. I love it when those things happen.